Everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting today's webinar, Financial Planning for Special Needs Families. My name's Eddie Grant. I am the chair of EFPA in the UK. And we're so glad that you've joined us for what is a vital conversation, one that sits at the intersection of care, advocacy, and financial resilience. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Rhiannon Gogh, a chartered a planner and a fellow of the Personal Finance Society in the UK. Rhiannon is an award-winning advisor and founder of SENDA, and that's the UK Alliance of Special Needs and Disability Advisors. Rhiannon is not only a leading voice in inclusive financial planning, but also the author of the UK's first book dedicated to special needs financial advice. Her work has transformed how advisors engage with families navigating disability, care responsibilities, and the complex financial landscapes. She was also named Planner of the Year at the FT Advisor Diversity Awards. So Rhiannon brings both strategic insight and deep compassion to her practice. Today, she'll guide us through the unique challenges faced by families raising children with disabilities, from estate planning and access to benefits to cross-border considerations and the emotional realities of caregiving. Now, our session today is going to last 1 hour. There's opportunities for you to drop your questions in the Q&A, and we'll work through those during the webinar today. So whether you're a financial professional, a parent, carer, or someone passionate about inclusive planning, this session will equip you with the tools, framework, and stories that matter. So Rhiannon's approach is grounded in lived experiences, and she'll share a little bit more about that during this session. So without any further delay, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Rhiannon.
Thank you so much, Eddie, and thank you to the EFPA for having me and inviting me to talk about this crucial subject today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you talking about special needs financial planning and how transformative it can be. I won't linger on this slide because Eddie's given me a very gracious introduction. Thank you so much for that. Let's crack on looking at what we're going to be talking about today, which is the agenda and aims. My aims, and the reason for me being here today is very simple. So I want to empower and equip you to be able to identify and these types of clients to be able to offer them better outcomes. And that underpins everything I do, whether I'm talking to a family, whether I'm talking and consulting with a financial advisor. What I want to do is break down what can be incredibly complex subjects in a way that is accessible and in a way that empowers people to be able to have the right advice at the right time. I want to talk to you today about why special needs financial planning matters. I want to look at the unique challenges, and there are unique challenges to this group of families, to these groups or these cohorts that are different to very many other clients. So what are those? I want to look at what's called the ARC framework, and that is a risk mitigation framework. Now, you might be very well versed in special needs planning, or you might be at the very beginning of your journey. But I want to highlight the risks, the hidden blind spots that I see in my practice time and time again, and how to avoid those. I'd like to offer you a planning blueprint. So through my work at SENDA, the Alliance of Special Needs Planners, and that alliance is an alliance of solicitors and financial advisors and charity professionals, we have come together to identify the basic foundation for special needs planning. And I'd like to share that with you. And I'd like to look at some best practice in this area. It is a busy presentation with lots of information. The slides will be given out to you, so don't feel like you have to note everything down. I'll be handing out slides, and I will be including as much valuable information as I possibly can within the presentation, information that will, I hope, equip you to serve families like mine better. So special needs planning found me, and I don't want to dwell on me and my story any more than to say that I am a mother of a child with autism. My son is here. He's 15 years old and he has profound autism. And what that means to those that don't know is that he's unable to communicate. He can't understand a question. He has no sense of danger. He's incredibly vulnerable in many respects. But I had no idea 10 years ago when I first started looking at my own financial affairs, I had no idea that I should be doing things differently within my financial planning because my son had autism and he was vulnerable. And if you'd have asked me back then, I would have said, well, there's nothing new that needs to be done. I can carry on doing the same type of financial planning that I've always done. There aren't really any unique financial challenges. Well, I certainly wasn't aware. I couldn't quite put my finger on them. And I thought, well, my son he has special needs, but this cohort of clients is really small. So there's probably no need for specialist advice. And when my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 3, I started feeling very nervous for his future. And it became, and it still is, one of the major worries in my life about what happens to him when I'm no longer here. And 10 years ago, I had no idea that financial planning could address what had become this all-consuming concern of mine about how my son would be provided for and protected when I was no longer here. And I went along to a meeting in 2016. It was a networking meeting. It's that building down at the bottom of your slide there. And it was nothing to do with special needs planning. I was a chartered financial planner at the time. I was the mother of a disabled young man that had been recently diagnosed. And I sat in a network meeting and I heard phrases like disabled persons trust. And I heard a story of somebody who couldn't receive their inheritance because they didn't have mental capacity. And I wondered what on earth I was listening to. I hadn't read that in any manual that I'd studied financial planning wise. I hadn't really understood what a disabled person's trust was. And can you imagine if that is me as a chartered financial planner with a disabled son, not understanding really why she needs to do anything different? How on earth would a parent know if a professional didn't at that point? And so I made it my mission when I first set up my firm. I made it my mission to start with my own family, and I put together a special needs plan for my son. And as I was looking at my own affairs, it dawned on me that everything I had done until then would only cause him financial harm. And I thought, right, I've come across something. I'm going to document my special needs plan, and I'm going to start telling other parents about it. And that's the second picture. And I still tell other parents about it to this day. I do seminars, probably around one seminar every couple of weeks now, with families worried about their young person, and I share how to plan for the future. That quickly turned into a want from professionals who wanted to know what I was doing. I started being mentioned in the press. The picture of my son was me and my son. I won an award and I was in this newspaper, and financial planners started contacting me to say, what are you doing? How does it work? Tell me what you're doing and what I need to know. And so then, third picture, I started communicating my pathway with professionals. And then lastly, I've written a book, Planning with Love. It's available. You can go and have a look at it if you want to, which has become a bestseller in personal financial planning. So I know parents want to know this message. In fact, I say parents, but financial planners have bought the book and told me how informative it has been. There is a need for this message. It found me. It has become a national movement within the United Kingdom. I've been featured in newspapers, and I'm so excited to share the tenets of financial planning for those with special needs with you today. I truly believe it will become, if it isn't already, a global movement, special needs financial planning, because it is needed. It is the numbers of those with disabilities I believe is staggering, and I'll share those with you in a second. But when I first started learning about special needs planning, I had no idea that there was a college devoted to special needs planning in the US, that there were qualifications you could take and study how to become a special needs planner in the US. And there were special savings accounts set up for those with disabilities, so ABLE accounts and special needs trusts. In Europe, there are specialist wills and arrangements. For example, in Germany, there's a specialist disability will, to the best of my knowledge. And in France, there are special allowances allowing for a larger inheritance to be passed on to someone with disability, again, to the best of my knowledge. So the mechanics and the framework for this really already exist. I've even had messages from advisors in Australia who have bought the book, or they might have read something about me online and have told me that what I'm doing resonates with them. So I'm very excited to welcome you into this global movement. I believe it will be a movement that will grow, and I strongly believe that soon there will be a recognised pathway for special needs planning. There certainly needs to be one. So let's take a step back and let's look at why this matters. So why am I here talking to you today? Well, number one, the numbers are staggering. I thought 10 years ago this was a niche thing that I was looking at, that not many people would be interested. Sure, it impacts my son, but how many children out there are like my son? Well, it turns out 10% of children worldwide have moderate to severe disabilities. 1 in 4 EU adults live with a disability, and 5% of EU families live with at least one disabled child. I find the numbers staggering. What is the impact of that? What does that mean for you and I? Well, it means that I would imagine you're already dealing with clients that might need specialist advice. If you look after families, you might be looking after families with disabled children. And if you look after adults, which I'm guessing you do, then potentially 1 in 4 of those might have a disability. So it is not a niche cohort. And secondly, the shared challenges which I have been able to identify in my work are specific to this group, which makes it quite straightforward for a financial advisor, and they are repeated. So if I'm reading a book about special needs planning from in the US, I'm reading about the same core underlying issues, the same core challenges that are prevalent here. The numbers are very similar, the challenges are similar. When I was preparing for this presentation, I read a beautiful paper of work from a Dutch financial advisor about how he had built a business based on special needs planning, used himself as a conduit, if you like, to bring in all the services that a family might need, picked up areas where someone hadn't had great advice, liaised with legal professionals, and used his passion to put together a special needs plan. I saw a website of a firm in France who only deal with families with disabilities. So it's fascinating to see those shared challenges being repeated and repeated and repeated. And it's those shared challenges that I'm going to share with you today. And lastly, the hidden risks of planning are utterly catastrophic. So it's important that we recognize this cohort, these clients, we understand the challenges, and then we are aware of the blind spots, the risks of carrying out the wrong advice, the risks of carrying out no advice. We need to be aware of those so we can mitigate them and protect the families that we serve. So that is why it matters. And if you trapped me in a lift and I had to tell you in 3 sentences why special needs planning should be a global movement, that's exactly what I would say. The numbers are staggering, the shared challenges are unique, and the consequences of poor advice or the wrong advice or no advice can be utterly catastrophic. I want to talk about the barriers to advice now. And I do this to help you, and you might already know this, and forgive me if you do. If you're dealing with or working with carers, you might have come across these too, but I come across these systemically. And that is that carers like me often experience a fragmentation of services and information. What does that mean? Well, it means that you find yourself having to talk to different agencies and pull together different professionals, and one professional doesn't know what the other one's talking about or doesn't know their speciality. And a perfect example of this was yesterday when I was asked by a professional at a local authority in England to come and talk to parents, to put together a talk for parents whose young people with learning disabilities were entering internships, supported internships, meaning they'd been sponsored to try and move them into employment, to help them gain employment. And the worker wanted me to talk to the parents from a financial perspective about financial planning that might be of interest to them, and through their life. And so how to set them up financially for life, what would their parents look at? And so my question to her was, okay, so apart from the supported internships, what does the path look like for these young people with complex learning disabilities? Where are they likely to live? Are they likely to be independent? And her answer was she said, I have no idea. I know about the supported internships. I don't know about any other part of the equation. I don't know about finances. I certainly don't know about what their life path looks like. And that's what it's like being a parent. You talk to one professional about something, and then you have to collate all the information. There's no joined up approach. There's a lack of understanding, I think. The amount of times as a financial planner that clients will say to me, oh, thank goodness you get it. Oh, she gets it. Oh, and I was joking with my co-founder, and I know my co-founder is on today for SENDA. And we almost feel like we have to have like a doormat in our new office that says, we get it. We really do get it, because there is a lack of just grasping the unique challenges. And so it's really important what we're talking about today to counter that. Isolation amongst carers, you will know as well as I do, you might not, but I can tell you that being a carer can be very isolating. You tend to become very self-sufficient and try to organize things yourself because, well, I can't take my son out to places. For starters, I would struggle to take him to see other professionals. Just getting him out of the house can be a real challenge, and it can be very distressing for him. So we've become this sort of self-sufficient, isolated unit, and that's not uncommon. And I've also noticed and feel sometimes there is a distrust of public services because carers might have been let down in the past. Now, this is not to dissuade you, quite the opposite. I want you to know that once you can become this family's trusted advisor, because of the usual barriers to advice, once you have met those, you gain such loyal clients, and clients that are willing to advocate for you so much because they've met someone that gets it. And I really believe that a financial advisor can sit as that conduit between charitable organizations, so I can refer them to charitable organizations if they need help. I can bring in legal and professional services. I can help them access state benefits, which is a minefield in itself, but I've got signposts that I've built up over years and calculators. I can help people access state benefits. So I become the conduit and their trusted advisor, and I cannot tell you how meaningful and fulfilling that is. So we've looked at why this matters, the numbers. We've looked at barriers to advice. Let's look now at the unique financial challenges. And this came from some work we did at SENDA. So we had charity, legal, financial advisors all coming together to think, right, what challenges are we actually meeting with this advice? And I wish someone had given me this 10 years ago, because I knew I was doing something different, but I didn't quite know what it was that I was trying to solve, if you like, for a client. And there are 5 key areas. The first one is the concept that money often passes down the generations. I want to provide for my son. His grandparents want to provide for him. And often that happens automatically. So if I died tomorrow and I didn't have the right estate plan in place, automatically my son, generally speaking, would in some way benefit from my passing. But whether that's a benefit or not, we'll discuss. Money would land with him. So that is often automatic, not always, but often. So the key tenet of that for a special needs planner is we're working out how can the estate be accessed safely without impacting care, benefits, and support? How can we make sure that money lands with that person or doesn't? It is protected in some protection so that it can be accessible, safe for them, and without impact to their care, benefits, or support. That is tenet number one. Secondly, we want to deal with this concept or recognize this concept that it's likely that my son will outlive me. And as his primary carer, that terrifies me because he is dependent on me. And anybody that's been a carer would understand that if you have someone that's dependent on you, my son can't talk, so I'm his voice and I'm his advocate and I fight for things for him. What would happen if I wasn't there? So because he's going to outlive me, that gives me a unique challenge as to, well, who's going to support him and how are they going to be funded? And I want that, so therefore, to be thinking as a financial planner about who that team is, who's going to be looking after him, how am I going to involve them in my financial planning discussions, how are we going to fund them, how are we going to protect them, how are we going to support them? A brilliant conversation to have right at the very beginning. It informs you as the financial planner who needs to be in that room with you talking. Number 3, providing for another lifetime. Very unique again. My son, it's likely, will not be able to work. There's a statistic in the United Kingdom that 5% of those with learning disabilities are in any kind of employment at all. 5%. So 95%, of which my son will be one, will not have any kind of employment. So where will his livelihood come from? Will it be provided by the state? Can that be certain? Will it be me and my husband putting in place provision for him? Will we be setting up life insurance plans? I've seen the use of annuities throughout Europe in some respects too. So this gives me a challenge as a parent because not only do I have to look at all of my financial planning, it's like a buy one, get one free scenario. I have to plan for my son too. I have to maybe hope that the provision that I have will last him when I'm no longer here. Very unique. Fourth, resilience. Now, there is a double-edged sword of being a carer from a financial perspective. And the first part of that is that it is very hard to work full-time when you're a carer. Very hard. My son gets up in the night, he turns on all the lights, he wants to use his computer. And as funny as that sounds, it's not funny when you're wanting to get to sleep and you want to work. And it results in the fact that one of us stays at home so that we can get him onto the taxi, off the taxi, look after him at night, and the other has a full-time job. And that's really common. Parents have to give up employment quite frequently to look after a disabled child. So we have that lower earnings. And then the flip side of that is that we have the higher costs of raising a child with disability. So we have a strain on our financial resilience. So how can we, as financial planners, is the question, boost that financial resilience? How can we potentially put in place insurance so that if a parent is sick, they can carry on or they can buy in care? How can we make this family unit as bulletproof as possible so that if they suffer these financial shocks and strains, they can keep on caring? And when the parents themselves go into long-term care, what mechanisms are there to look after the person who needs the care then? And then lastly, it's the transition to adulthood. And if I had to pick out the two most challenging areas, it would be this one, the transition to adulthood, and the first one. It's like the bookends of special needs planning. And this is all to do with decision making. So when my son reaches 18, how will he make financial decisions? If he doesn't have mental capacity, who can be a controller or a guardian or a supervisor for him? And how does that happen? Am I prepared for it? Has my financial advisor helped me, pointed me in the right direction, gotten me the legal professional that I need to help me with that? What does my son's savings look like? Are they accessible? Should they be accessible? Should he have access to lots and lots of money when he turns 18, or should that be held with me instead? What does the housing plan for him look like? Is that something I need to start saving when he is when he's 10? And what benefits will he need at 18? And you notice that when I want to point out something really important, that is it not true that in financial planning, the more warning we have about something, the better. The more time we have to plan, the better. And quite often I'm asked, well, why do you talk about children? Why do you talk about the disabled families of disabled children so much and not the families of disabled adults? And it's for that reason, because if you can identify within a family that they have a child with disabilities, you can embark on early intervention. You can talk to a family about their dreams around housing, and you can put in place plans early to grow a fund to buy a house. It's all about the time that you have, and early identification is therefore key. Let's look at some unseen risks when planning for disabled dependents. And these are stories that are really echoed all the time. And there's nothing worse actually than, as a special needs planner, when the phone rings and somebody is asking you for help and they have fallen into a trap and there is very little you can do to help them get out of that trap. Quite often, the risks of planning, once you've fallen foul of them, you cannot extricate yourself from them. And I'll explain that now. So in the first scenario, we have a father who died unexpectedly, leaving his entire estate to his son who had autism. His son was about to receive funding for a residential home, so his son was going to move into a care home. He was in receipt of benefits and he didn't have the mental capacity, he lacked mental capacity, sorry. So what went wrong when Dad died? Well, first of all, the son, because he didn't have mental capacity, he couldn't access the estate that Dad left for him. There had to be a court involved, a court-appointed deputy. They couldn't find one. It ended up being a cousin who had to go to court to apply to be this young man's deputy, so basically to make financial decisions on behalf of him because he couldn't. So he couldn't receive his estate. Even though he couldn't receive his estate, for the basis of means testing funding for his residential home, he was assumed to have that money. So he lost his care home funding. He lost his means tested benefits. The social worker that looked after him said, well, it's he'll now become a self-funder, which means he'll have to pay for his own care. But the key was, when he ran out of the money to pay for his own care, he'd have to be reassessed. Who would help him with that? And as he was told, or the social worker told the cousin, yes, he'll be reassessed, but there's no guarantee he'll get his means tested care package back or the residential home placement, that will continue. It was an utter disaster in many respects. The second scenario is the one below. So we've got grandparents saving for a granddaughter, so common, or a grandchild. And they had this idea that we could fund some care, we could buy her. I remember actually one case where they said, we'll fund her care and we're going to buy her a beautiful scooter, and maybe she could be living semi-independently, so we'll get live-in care to come in, And that's what they had a dream of saving that for her. And they put the money in her own name. And she turned 18. And lo and behold, there she is in control of a large sum of money in her own name. She did have the mental capacity to make her own decisions, and she could access the money, but she was incredibly vulnerable. So she couldn't understand financial abuse, manipulation, body language, the nuance of language, any kind of social and communication issues, or elements she really struggled with. So what went wrong? Well, we had a situation where she did take control of her money. She became a target for abuse. She was approached by somebody, a friend, and ended up spending a lot of the money that the grandparents could do very little about it. And she was a target of abuse. She lost the vast majority of that money. She didn't lose it, she gave it away. There were no controls that had been put in place for her. So she could access it, but she was incredibly vulnerable. And a risk framework, I don't say this lightly, could have avoided these harms. So how would the parents have known not to do this? How would the grandparents have known not to do this? And this is the nub of the matter. They often don't know that they need to do anything differently. So when they phone someone like me and say, help me get out of this situation, they often say, why did nobody tell me about it? Why did nobody warn me that this was going to happen? And this is how you can do this, and how you can warn parents, how you can protect yourselves, how you can protect families by having a framework that points out the 99% of all of the challenges that I see, all of the financial planning blind spots that I see. And I would it's a simple framework. I use this framework every single day in many, if not all, of the interactions that I have with families. It is a framework that I will walk through with families. And I will ask myself usually when I'm setting up something for somebody, or if I have a new client and I'm looking at what they have in place already, I'll look at what's going to land with this young person, what's already in their name, what the parents want to set up, and I'll think, right, okay, how will that young person access it? Will it need a court? Will they have mental capacity to access it? Will it need a guardian or a controller? Would it be better if that asset was separated away from them? Should they have access to it? So I'm thinking access. Then I think risk. So regardless of whether they can access it or not, if they had this money, would it make them more vulnerable? Would they become a target? And if so, as an advisor, what do I need to do? Again, do I need to make sure they don't have access to the money? Do I need to use protective elements? In the UK, maybe trusts. Elsewhere, maybe a court-appointed person or guardian that would look after that and make financial decisions. How can I stop them being at risk? I went to a party in the village where I live, and I had a conversation with the solicitor. I was queuing up for the buffet at this party. It was nothing to do with work. It was a village thing. And behind me, there was a solicitor, and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, oh, who are you? What are you doing? And what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, special needs advisor. I help families of children with disabilities and so on. I explained what I did. And she said, oh, I'm a solicitor. I've got this case. You'll find it really interesting. You know, I'm edging towards the buffet. She's talking to me about special needs planning and the village. Never expected it to happen. And she told me the story of a young man with Asperger's. He was in his late 30s, and he had been left the entire estate of his mother. So his mum had passed away, left him everything, and he could access it. He had mental capacity. He wasn't in receipt of any means tested benefits. He was working, actually. And his challenge was that he was incredibly vulnerable. He couldn't understand when someone was lying to him. So he received the 7-figure estate outright, and he was, just like the previous lady or girl, approached by a family friend. And over the course of months, this family friend managed to steal effectively the majority of the money. The first thing they asked for was solar panels for their house. They'd say things like, your mum wanted to look after the money for me. But that resulted in the young man with Asperger's giving away the majority of his inheritance. And the solicitor told me that, oh, he's been left with so little he cannot afford to pay my bills. That's how much was given away, was stolen. He had become a target. The money that he had received from his mother had made him more vulnerable. And a framework like this, it may have been, could have stopped that from happening. And the last part of the framework is care and support. So we need to think, will what I'm doing now, the action I'm taking, the plans that are in place, is that going to negatively impact care, support, or benefits? Is it going to leave them worse off? And in which case, what can I do? How can I protect it? How can I separate it? How can I stop those benefits from being impacted? Access, risk, and care. And the last thing I would say about the ARC framework is this. It can be sometimes very difficult to articulate quickly when you have a chance meeting with a client or a phone call about special needs planning. If someone phones me out of the blue and they'll ask me, well, why do I need to do anything differently? What is special needs planning all about? Why do I need to do something different? And I'll use this. So I'll say, because if you don't, it is possible that your young person will not be able to access the money you leave them or give them, or their own money. It's likely they'll be vulnerable or at risk with the money in their own control, and it could negatively impact their means-tested care, benefits, or support. Very succinct, very clear for a parent to understand and therefore need to take action with. So we're going to look a little bit about how that fits into planning in practice, and then we're going to wrap up with a really brief case study. So if we look at the sequence, we would identify the first part on the right side of this slide would be that we're identifying there's someone within the family that has a special need and disability. Do not belittle that. If you're asking those questions, if you're asking about whether anyone in the family would be vulnerable in control of their own money, you are 10 steps ahead, because many advisors who ask me or consult with me often don't do that. They focus on the parents. They don't often ask questions about the child. You would then need to understand the child, and you do that so that you know the type of plan you're putting together, the type of protection you need. And you would ask the questions on the left-hand side of the screen there, asking open questions. Tell me about your child. How does their autism or their vulnerability present? In what ways would they be most vulnerable? These are crucial questions because it informs the plan that you're putting in place. And a great example before we wrap up, I spoke to a family yesterday, and I started off with this sequence, and I said, tell me about your daughter. Tell me all about her. How does her vulnerability present? And her vulnerability presented in the way that the daughter had a language impairment, but it meant that she could speak very fluently, but she couldn't understand what people were saying. So she could understand commands, but she couldn't understand the sort of nuance of what people were saying. And her vulnerability, her parents told me very much, was if she was told by an adult to do something, she thought she had to do it. And she would do it, and she would follow that command. She wouldn't be able to process it, but she would just sort of the reasons behind it, but she would want to do that. She wants to know that she's compliant. She worries about breaking the rules, and she wants to fit in. So the minute the parents told me this, I'm thinking, over here, I'm going to get her a professional trustee. And that means I'm going to find someone within that team who can support her in the future to guard her against that vulnerability and to help her know that she's always doing the right thing. And it's just little things like that that help you put the right plan in place. That, the parents told me, meant more to them than the sort of intricacies of how we're going to structure their life insurance, for example. And it all comes down to understanding the child. I want to know the family and the professionals so that I know who I can bring into my plan. I'm going to identify the unseen risks using my framework, and then I'm going to create a plan using the blueprint. And the last question on this slide is really important. What would the vision be for their best future? This can be such an aspirational field to work in. You can be transformative as a special needs planner. You really can change people's lives. But before I go, I'd just like to paint a picture of what special needs planning looks like in practice. On the left of this slide, you have a dad. And this dad, what he's doing in that picture is he's refurbishing an ambulance because his son here couldn't get any kind of provision after school. So of course, as you do, dad goes and buys an old ambulance, refurbishes it, makes it into a mobile sensory bus for his son and some friends to get some kind of input from after school. That's mum, she's a teacher. This was his grandfather, and this is his brother here. And so when we're looking at special needs planning, we looked at estate planning for the mum, the dad, and the grandfather. We looked at team family roles, which in this case is going to be his brother. So we thought, how can we provide for the brother? Could we set up a life insurance and make sure the brother is the beneficiary of it, so he's got funds to look after his autistic sibling? We looked at provision through life insurances for the parents, boosting the savings of mum and dad and increasing their financial resilience, and then decision-making, a deputyship court order for the son with the brother as a replacement. And very recently, we arranged the purchase of a bungalow, a house, a single-story house. We call this a bungalow in the UK, and for Henry, and arranged living care. But that was because mum and dad had put in place a savings plan. We identified early that that's what they wanted to do. That was their dream for their son. And he moved into his own house. Grandfather has since passed away, but we were able to put in place a specialist will for him that meant that he passed down an inheritance safely, which was actually used to refurbish the bungalow too. Thank you so much for your time today. If you'd like to know more about SENDA, please look at the website senda.org.uk. There's a link to it right there. And please follow us on LinkedIn. I'd love to know your thoughts. What resonated with you from today? What struck a chord from today? And something hit me in that first presentation, and I wonder whether something hit you from today's presentation too. If you want to become a member of SENDA, look us up on LinkedIn. We have an amazing podcast. That's me there with my arms folded and my co-founder saying because special needs planning is a thing. Go and listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you in advance for any questions I look forward to answering. Thank you for the invitation to talk to you today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. And I'm sure, just like when I saw you speak for the first time, I'm sure you've sort of stimulated lots of questions in the audience's mind. I know that one of the questions that came in was in relation to where can people find out some more information. So obviously you've got the podcast and the website, and I think there's over 1,000 people that have joined the LinkedIn page already, and you do a newsletter, which is a fantastic newsletter to subscribe to. Just thinking about the fact that we've got 101,000 members across EFPA in Europe, and the network there. In terms of sort of cross-border, have you experienced any issues where families obviously are more mobile nowadays? What could be the potential issues that you see?
Well, I have a family that springs to mind immediately, who is UK based, but their trustees are based in Spain. And so their son is dual nationality, and who the family in the UK want to act on the son's behalf if they're no longer here is Spanish and based in Spain. So it is absolutely crucial. When I said within that blueprint, identifying the team, that's absolutely crucial to look at that, because there will be different ways that somebody from a different jurisdiction can either be or not be a trustee. For starters, inheritance tax rules are completely different. but with specialist support. So with that case in mind, we were able to draft that Spanish person in as a trustee, and it was perfectly fine. In fact, the solicitor in the UK contacted a solicitor in Spain and was able to tie up with them in that respect. So the key is knowing about it, asking the right questions, and making sure that we have the right professionals talking to the right professionals. That's absolutely key.
And we've got one of the questions that's come in from Christopher talking about Czechoslovakia and setting up trusts there and disabled trusts. How can you get the message across Europe about the benefits of disabled trusts? Is there a forum in Europe? Have you got a
Well,
network?
Well, STEP exists in Europe, actually, the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. So STEP is cross-border. So STEP is a global operation. So I would look at STEP members, and I would, like I said with the fragmentation point, I think it's all about liaising with the right professionals and building up your own planning network. So in your shoes, Christopher, what I would be doing is I would be liaising with specialist solicitors. So I'd be finding specialist solicitors in my area, liaising with them, finding specialist charities, specialist parent groups, and just bringing together my own support and advice network. And organizing that for my client and becoming their trusted conduit.
And within the UK, what we've seen obviously is that our regulator has really pushed vulnerability very hard and has raised the profile. And we've had the consumer duty legislation as well, which has put greater emphasis on the client and making sure there's real value for the client. Are you seeing that trickling down to families with special needs as well? Are they benefiting from these changes?
I think there's more work to be done, if I'm honest. I think they could benefit more from consumer duty. And it's an interesting field to be in, special needs planning, because it's just like it feels like the most hidden area of financial planning. Once you talk to financial advisors and you explain the background to it, a light bulb usually goes off and they see that it's a common sense approach, but it's not quite a common approach yet, Eddie. And so what I hope with consumer duty, and it's something that my advisory board at SENDA is working on, is that message can be broadened to involve carers more specifically of children with special needs. I think it needs to happen. I feel that they are disenfranchised in some ways from advice right now, and that's part of this raising awareness aim that I have personally.
Brilliant. And you mentioned at the beginning about America, and you can do exams and there's far more structure, I think, for special needs planning. Could you just talk a little bit about that and perhaps how in Europe we could we could do the same?
I would like to see an accreditation in Europe, actually. I very much so as it is in the US. So within the US, it's fascinating because there are colleges set up for special needs planners. There's certification, accreditation in this area, and there are also firms that are within large wealth management firms in the US that are groups of advisors that are solely devoted to special needs planning. So if you were to walk into my office and come and see the board behind me, you would see the Merrill Lynch special needs team, and they're up there. And it's just one of my sort of things I put on the board. And I found them and I thought that's just a nice visual that I keep on my board. But it is more ingrained in what they do. And I believe we will start to see that actually in Europe. And I think the first step is opening the gate of awareness about it, because there isn't the awareness yet. There really isn't. But once that awareness grows, I truly believe there will be a movement and accreditation and a pathway that will only benefit financial advisors and, of course, these families. I think there's so much to learn from the US. And listen, this is important to say, just because the US does it doesn't mean we have to do it. Well, of course not. But if you look at that and say, right, well, the numbers are roughly the same, the challenges are roughly the same, why would we not want to do that too, to create a pathway that serves those needs too?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And just could you talk a little bit about SENDA? Because SENDA's um, quite special in that you've brought together a group of professionals and including charities as well.
Mm.
Could you talk a little bit about that, and then perhaps think about how that could be broadened out across Europe as well? I'm sure we can, work towards having a network across Europe because clients are mobile as well.
100%. No, I would encourage anyone on this call to come along to our Sender website or the LinkedIn page and have a look at what we do. What Sender is it is special needs planning is not an individual sport, it is a team sport. So it is done best, and I wrote about this a lot in the book because it's not just about the financial advisor, it is about the financial planner, the legal planners, the charity work, all of these all of these professions coming together to put this holistic plan in place. And it is best when it is done like that. You cannot do this in a silo. You have to work together. And when I thought I have to launch something where we can all come together and share ideas. And I didn't know, is the honest answer, if it would be popular when I first launched it back a year ago. And I've had so much interest from solicitors who want to understand how their part of the puzzle fits in special needs planning, financial advisors who want to understand their part, networking opportunities. So if a solicitor wants to identify how a financial advisor can help, and of course refer, and vice versa. And then with the charity, that is fascinating. So MenCap, the MenCap Wills and Trusts company, or the MenCap Trust Co, is one of our board advisory board members. Now, they are on the ground answering questions from parents every single day. They're setting up trusts for families, and their input has been invaluable in how we get our message across to families. What are the real on the ground concerns? And now we have a situation where the charities, when they're receiving questions, they can think, right, well, we've got this network of dedicated and skilled professionals. We can then refer out to them. So it just becomes this family, if you like, an amazing network. And it has grown hugely, hugely. So I would love to see that grow in Europe. I would set the challenge that if anybody wants to set up, is interested in setting up a SENDA in Europe and working with us in SENDA, get in touch with me. Would love to hear from you.
Brilliant. And just as we come to the end of the session, um, I think it's always really good just to remind people if you had sort of three key things people should do after this session when they're talking to their clients, what would those three key things be? And also sort of the questions that perhaps they need to ask the clients.
I would go back to the slide with the steps on it. The very first thing that you can do, which is groundbreaking, is identify clients that need this for starters because they just go under the radar. And so my top tip would be ask questions. And the question that I would ask in English, and I hope this translates well, is whether anyone in the family would be vulnerable in receipt of their own money. You don't have to use specific language. You can just say a sentence like that just to identify the need. And then I would be using the questioning techniques that I've put on those slides as well. So I would be asking about the vision for the child, not being scared to ask about it, because I can tell you, having spoken to thousands of families, they quite often want to talk about their child. They're really happy to talk about their child. If they get the opportunity to talk about their young person, they'll probably keep you there forever. But on a serious note, they do want to talk. So identify, ask questions. And my third point, I no, I've got no. I'll give you an extra one. My third point would be to don't think you have to do it all on your own. So build your specialist network. So when I first started, I couldn't, this type of advice, I wouldn't have been able to tell you the intricacies of different trusts, but I knew a good solicitor. And so I could just make that referral. And it's building up that professional network. The last thing I would say is that there are so many things that you can do just by documenting who is involved in the plan. And I love that. So letters of wishes we have in the UK, letters of intent in the US. But when I sit with a family, I'll just quite often think, right, well, what do they want for their young person? Who do I need to involve in this plan? And just documenting and having that conversation with them tends to open up a lot of doors. An example would be, oh, well, the grandfather wants to leave him some money. Great. Okay, I need to go and speak to the grandfather. We need to talk about estate planning for him. It just opens up doors. So identify, ask questions, build your own professional network, and start formulating a plan just with who's going to be involved in that plan when you start talking to the family.
Brilliant. And I think that I've heard you say this before about asking the person if there's as someone in the family, um, and for many financial planners deal with the grandparents, and I think that's a fantastic question, because if you don't ask that question, then you can't really do generational planning, because if you don't know where the money's going and the implications of sending that money. And I think that's a question, when I've spoken to financial planners, it's a question that really resonated, because it then opened up some real issues that the planning can miss if you don't ask the right questions. So I think that's, for me, if it was like if I could only keep one of your great ideas, for me that would be the one, because I think it is often the question that's not asked. It's an assumed answer. So I think that's a really important one. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. Looking at the feedback that's come through online, this session has really resonated with people. We've had a great attendance as well. So it's definitely a sweet spot for financial planning, and definitely there's more that we can do. As you mentioned at the beginning, the slides will be available for people, and this has been recorded as well, so people can watch again or share with colleagues. And I think that's the other thing. Please take this message out to as many people across Europe as we possibly can. So once again, thank you, Rhiannon. It's been a brilliant hour. It's gone really quickly, which is a good indication of how much you've put in there and how engaging you've been. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing from you. And please go and visit the SENDA website and learn more. Thank you.